Well, in recent years, there's been a magnifying glass on Imagineering, which is the creative arm of the Disney parks, and I think rightfully so, whether it's the Epcot overhaul, whether it's Tiana's Bayou Adventure having its issues on both coasts, and even looking at the most recent land announcements made at D23. Lots of questions about things that are being removed, like Muppets Courtyard, like the Rivers of America, and again, some questions about what's going in. Cars seem to land in Frontierland. And recently there's been a lot of people talking about the Haunted Mansion out in Disneyland, with the gift shop having been caught using AI art in a prefabbed building. So there's just lots of things, lots of questions that have been going on about Imagineering. But there's an article here from the Los Angeles Times where they talked to Kim Irvine, who is the creative director of Disneyland's Imagineering. And it had some interesting things in here, as some things are changing in Haunted Mansion out there as well, which means it's probably going to change at Disney World. So I figured this would be a really good article to read through and give some thoughts on, because there are some very interesting quotes in this article that I think give us a good idea into the mindset of current Imagineering. So we're going to read through this and give some thoughts. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic. And again, this is Los Angeles Times, and this is First Look. Disneyland's original Haunted Mansion returns with a heartbreaking new scene. So when Disneyland's Haunted Mansion reopens Saturday in its classic non-holiday form, it will essentially mark the completion of a nearly year-long refurbishment project, one that added significant backstory and lore to one of the resort's most famed and mysterious attractions. A fixture at the park since 1969, the Haunted Mansion has been the subject of regular tinkering, its illusions evolving and changing as technology and culture advances.
Oh, there it is.
This update will be no different. One of the mansion's signature scenes has been remade and now has a much more somber story to tell. And what they're changing out here is the bride in the attic scene. That's basically the main part of what's been changing out here. While Disney Imagineering, the secretive arm of the company devoted to theme park experiences, has been again revisited the ride's trademark attic scene, long home to a tortured bride. There's still a bride, but she's never quite looked or acted like this. It's not the only major change to an attraction developed during the Walt Disney era. An expanded queue has added narrative-focused gardens and a greenhouse to where guests will wait in line, while a new gift shop adjacent to the ride's exit expands on the storyline of Madame Leota, seen in the attraction as a disembodied floating head in a seance scene. Imagery at Ride's Inn, in which a ghost will follow you home, has also been updated. As for the would-be honeymooner in the attic, she's now utilizing the latest in projection technology, appearing to float before guests as she holds a three-pronged physical candelabra, giving corporal depth to her ethereal glow, which hovers away from a shattered window of a wall. Her blindingly red heart, in a nod to the park's original vision of the bride, still beats in time to an elongated, gloomy rendition of Richard Wagner's Bridal Chorus. Disneyland's Haunted Mansion has for about 55 years stood as a love letter to humanity's most hedonistic tendencies. Gluttony, greed, sloth, lust, and even murder have been on display in its cryptic halls. We're all going to bite it in the end, the mansion seems to tell us, so let's live it up. There's also no gilded gates here, but there is one heck of a party, complete with serenading busts, ballroom dancers, excitable opera singers, drunken buffoonery, and portraits locked in an endless duel. And now there's heartbreak. In an exclusive preview of the revamped scene on Tuesday morning at Disneyland, where operations have not been interrupted by the LA area fires, I stood across from the new bride for a number of minutes. I marveled at how the hidden in the floor projections allow the ghost to levitate, but also increasingly felt a sense of mourning. Like many locals, my emotions are heightened at the moment, but I also struck at how much more clearly defined the bride's face is now, appearing grief-stricken and lovesick. I tell Kim Irvine, the longtime creative director with Imagineering at Disneyland, that unlike the previous bridal scene, here I'm feeling a sense of sorrow. She says that's intentional, noting that the team wanted to heighten the sadness in her face. We thought, what if we changed the story back a little bit to the original story that the Imagineers had about a lost bride in the attic mourning the loss of her husband, she says. It was a sad thing. It was a story about lost love. The last time the attic received a major overhaul was in the mid-2000s, and that figure known as the Black Widow bride had more aggressive, sinister story to tell. Holding an axe, she was portrayed as a murderous, wealth-seeking seductress who had beheaded her husbands, evident by their heads disappearing from the wedding portraits scattered around the attic. Those pictures are still present, only now the full bodies of the men vanished, leaving their departure up to the imagination. Irvine says the attic scene was redone in part because the projection technology on the prior figure had become so outdated as to necessitate regular maintenance, but rather than update what was there, Irvine saw an opportunity to add a greater contrast with more festive waltz in the prior room as well as to embellish the mansion's tale.
I got a bad feeling about this.
The candelabra, for instance, that the character is holding is identical to the one visible floating in an earlier hall scene, now implying the bride is broodingly wandering the mansion. Additionally, the candelabra will appear a third time, materializing in a cemetery crypt in the ride's final act. The bride that used to be in there was an axe murderer, and in this day and age, we have to be really careful about the sensitivities of people.
Jesus God, no.
We were celebrating someone chopping off her husband's heads, and it was a weird story. I know the fans, some will like it, and some will say, oh, you changed something again. That's our job. That's what we're here for. Even with this story, you can make the assumption with multiple husbands that all died, like she perhaps has done something to them, maybe just not axe murdering them, but something weird. I mean, if anybody's been married to 5 people and they all died, that would be a little suspect on some level. I mean, the quote about celebrating the murder or axe wielding bride, that's kind of insane. Like that quote there, as if it's being celebrated. Some people are going to like that character. That's also how a lot of movies go. Some people like villains. So there's a villain's land you want to build. Like the story of the mansion is not celebrating her. Some people enjoy the character because there are just some people that enjoy a darker tone with things, or they like horror movies. They like things like that. But just because some people enjoy that doesn't mean that the ride itself or the story of the ride is celebrating that. But again, I'll just add, if that's the mindset here, that you can't have the axe-wielding bride in this ride because, quote, it's celebrating her and you have to update it to modern sensibilities, then how are you going to do a villain's land? So technically, in a villain's land, you are celebrating villains. I mean, in villain's land, the list of villains that they have said they're going to use, you have Mother Gothel, who kidnapped a child, held her hostage. Like, I've made the argument many times. I think Mother Gothel is one of the worst villains ever because she kidnaps a baby for her own, selfish means of staying young. Like, that story, like, she's not a good person. She's terrible. Cruella de Vil, wants to murder puppies. You have Gaston, which I've often argued, Gaston and the Beast are basically the same character, just one gets a redemption arc. But even then, Gaston is supposed to be this womanizing, arrogant guy. Well, if you have his presence at all, isn't that celebrating Gaston? Womanizing, being, the modern sensibilities wouldn't allow for that. So his mere presence in the parks at all should be removed, according to this standard. The same thing would go for having Pirates of the Caribbean at all. Pirates are not good guys. That's a known thing about pirates, and they've tinkered a lot with pirates. But pirates are not, these jolly sailors that go around helping people. They're pirates. They pillage, they steal, they do bad things. But it's a story of a lot of people like pirates and understand that they weren't good guys. So technically, Pirates of the Caribbean is celebrating pirates. So that has to go too, because now you're opening up, if this is the standard, what can exist in the parks if this is how you're going to judge? But they're not going to, that's the thing is, they're not going to get rid of pirates. Like, this is the same thing I said about Dr. Facilier. They're just picking and choosing where they want to enforce certain mindsets and ideology based off what they feel is, certain sensitivities. At the end of the day, they still want to make money, so they're not going to get rid of pirates, and they'll change Haunted Mansion. But at the same time, I would also argue, if we're going to take out all of the bad things that happen in Haunted Mansion, it's not a Haunted Mansion. It's just an old building. That's not a fun or spooky story. That's just it's just an old building that stuff happens in maybe, and you go through it. That's not really spooky. And I've never heard of anybody going on Haunted Mansion and being traumatized for life. I've never heard it. Maybe somebody got really upset for the most part. If you were scared of it as a kid, it's probably a funny story when you get older to look back on it. But I've never heard anybody coming out being absolutely traumatized by the events that happened in the Haunted Mansion. And again, you changed something again. That's our job. That's what we're here for. If you're supposed to be here to create experiences and tell stories that are timeless, you're not here to change things for the sake of changing things. But again, if you just wanted to say we wanted to go back more toward the classic, okay, that's fine. But to then put this out here, again, it's them virtue signaling about how modern audiences want something different and we have to be so sensible, the sensibilities of people. I just don't understand why saying this. Like, to me, the PR thing just would be, yeah, we just want to pay homage to the original Haunted Mansion. There you go. No one's going to care. I don't understand. This is the thing we talked about in another video about sort of the double standard with Dr. Facilier, how he's not, they didn't want him in the Tiana's Bayou Adventure because of voodoo and different things like that, but yet they'll still sell his merchandise and they'll still have him be part of Halloween and be part of, in the same park, he's heavily involved, or at least, during Halloween. I don't understand the thinking here because it's not consistent. It's just, it seems very selective on the things that they want to change. Irvine knows the vast Disneyland fan base will be paying close attention as one of Disneyland's most celebrated attractions, one created by a cadre of Walt's original Imagineers. Fan attachment to the Haunted Mansion is strong, and the Disney faithful are especially protective of the Haunted Mansion. To wit, an online controversy erupted earlier this winter when it was discovered that the new shop adjacent to the ride contained a piece of art that was created by artificial intelligence. The presence of AI art felt particularly egregious, knowing the value Imagineering places on authentic handcrafted work. The moment clearly weighed on Irvine. She says, quote, "How they can find one thing out of all this cool stuff," Irvine says of the fan outcry trailing off as she stood in the shop full of artfully created oddities and references to tarot and mysticism. She stresses that the AI art was a temporary placeholder, noting there are many objects coming to the shop, more paintings and tapestries among them, that are in the process of being fireproofed before final install.
I don't believe you.
They felt like it would be appropriate for a short time until they could put something else in, Irvine says of the ill-fated art. They never intended to do anything bad, and it is now gone. We're going to bring something back in that is hand-painted like all of the other pieces are. I don't believe this for 1 second. They got caught using AI art, and now they're trying to act. First off, they're going at the fans saying, oh, they found one thing out of all this to nitpick. It wasn't just the fact that there was AI art. It was also the fact that there was off-the-shelf things that you could get on Amazon and other places. And even still, there's a fountain in the Haunted Mansion queue they put in that you can go buy online. Like, there's a lot of things that are not Imagineering level, at least historically. Now, I fully admit there are things I'm sure in the past that they have bought in other places, trinkets and things, but it's one thing to get something from a, let's say, an antique shop or some old thing, but it's another thing to just go straight off of Amazon and get stuff. And the AI art, I don't buy it that it was a placeholder. If that's the case, don't open. If it's not ready to open, then don't open it. But this goes into Disney, in my opinion, and this has been a long time. They just simply won't ever take an L. They will never admit wrong. They will always have an excuse. And this, yet again, goes back to it, is they got caught with this, and especially from, and they're not saying this in the article, but apparently the Haunted Mansion gift shop was not by Imagineering. It was by Disney's marketing team. But obviously, Imagineering had some sort of input in here because she's talking about it. But all you have to do in this situation is just say, hey, you know what? We shouldn't have done that. It doesn't meet our standards. Going forward, we're going to make sure that we have original artwork in here because this is what the fans deserve. But instead, you have to take a little shot at the fans that noticed it because they're passionate. And then you have to say, no, it was just temporary. We were going to replace it. Well, there's no way to know if that's the case. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that was not the case. That would have stood up there for years if nobody noticed it. So again, it's just not being able to take an L on this whenever it is, in my opinion, a legitimate criticism of a company that has high standards, at least historically speaking, and you're using just off-the-shelf AI art. It's not a great look. It's not the end of the world. Not a great look, though. Going about the shop. The shop, Irvine says, has been in the works for about a decade. It's designed as a carriage house, and the story is Madame Leota has taken it over as a live-in space. Irvine says it's created to rhyme with the mansion, particularly in its color scheme, utilizing the same tones of green and white, only with different places of emphasis. If the design is less ornate, Irvine notes that it's purposeful, pointing out antebellum carriage houses were a little bit knocked down. Its size was a challenge. To shoehorn anything into tiny Disneyland is really hard, Irvine says, adding, a lot of people in merchandising would have preferred it was bigger. I mean, that sounds nice, except for the fact that you plan this for 10 years, and the building is a prefabbed barn building that anybody can go by. It's very obvious that's what this was. So maybe it was planned out for 10 years, but it seems like obviously in the construction of this building, it was done with a budget in mind to do it as cheaply and easily as possible. It seems this is damage control on many levels because a lot of the Disneyland people have not been happy about this gift shop and the stuff they found, the prefab building, the art pieces, the AI art, the stuff you can find on Amazon. And it seems like now this is damage control to act like that this is all being planned and if you shouldn't be questioning these things. She says, Irvine says she isn't bothered when fans discover where an item was procured. It would be impossible for us to make everything, Irvine says. She also spots areas to continue to tinker. I don't know if that's good. She wonders if a grassy nook in front of the mansion is too pristine, as she laments the fact that a fountain relocated from nearby New Orleans Square is no longer pumping water, noting such complex construction wasn't in the budget. She points to an iron house on a utility box, quickly adding to the direction of the face and handle may someday need to be changed. And there may still be work to be done inside the mansion. When Imagineering last made updates to the attraction in 2021, Irvine's team spoke of potentially removing the hanging corpse in the stretching room, noting such an image could be triggering for some guests. She says, quote, "We're still looking at that," Irvine says. "That one is complicated structurally, one thing at a time." I mean, it's been reported before, but the hanging corpse in the stretching room, I think, is from that quote right there, they're going to remove it. And again, this just goes to where Imagineering's head's at. None of this to me is about creating a great guest experience. It seems to be all about worrying about certain people being upset by things and removing this because of this and that, or, you know, the hanging corpse scene is traumatizing. It's been there for a long time. It's a haunted mansion. Again, you're talking about something that is spooky and scary. Like, something like that is fitting with it. Now, the rest of the ride, like, it's not really a spooky thing. It's kind of comical in many ways. Like, it's lighthearted in other ways. It's not supposed to be a scary ride. So it's playing into a lot of these things. But again, you're talking about what makes a house haunted is bad things have happened in it. You can't have a haunted mansion if nothing bad ever happened in it. That's just a happy house. I don't really know. I mean, there would be nothing spooky about it. It would just be the fact that, like, people lived there and some of them died, but they were really good people. Like, that's not scary. That's not something people really want to see. And again, this kind of just gives you a mindset into at least an aspect of Imagineering, which I'm not hearing anything in here about creating a memorable experience or really paying homage to the original, you know, creators of the Haunted Mansion. It's more about needing to tinker, and that's what we do. We make changes. I don't think changes for the sake of changes is something that is a good thing. I think if things need to be changed or updated due to technology, that's fine. But to change it because you just think you're supposed to change things all the time, I personally don't think that that is a good thing. And again, I think this brings lots of questions, not only on the recent things that have been done at Disneyland and Disney World, but the future things they're doing. I have said for a long time, you look at the Epcot overhaul, I don't have a lot of hope about the stuff that they're going to build based off Tiana's Bay Adventure. And not everything has been bad. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy is a fantastic roller coaster. Tron and Ratatouille are solid rides, but those were port overs from overseas, so they already knew how to do those. But you're talking like brand new attractions, brand new things. I think it's fair to question a lot of these things, you know, in a time where your biggest competitor, now I know this is Disneyland, but, you know, as a company, your biggest competitor is opening up a brand new theme park later this year that is pushing boundaries, being very creative, being innovative, have a lot of things that people want to check out. Instead, Disney is removing things from classic attractions by Imagineers that was designed and created by Imagineers much more talented than them, that had direct connections to Walt, and they're changing aspects of it because of modern day sensibilities. Instead of thinking about imagination, pushing the boundaries, trying new things. Like, this does not seem like anything that they're saying here is even remotely in that ballpark. And I do think it asks valid questions about the state of Imagineering, of what are they capable of doing. As a big brand, when you have fans that are that invested, that's actually a privilege, because that means people are passionate and they care. And I liken it very much to sports. I've never met a sports fan of a sports team that was always happy with what their team was doing all the time. They love the team, but if you go up and ask them, let's say it's a baseball team, how do you think our pitching is? They could probably go on a diatribe about how terrible the pitching is, how the GM needs to go, how the general manager needs to go. We need a right fielder, whatever it is. There's a bunch of things that they'll say they need, not because they hate the team, but because they love the team and they want them to win. And there's people that have all sorts of opinions about these things. And this is kind of goes into nerddom, debating and critiquing and saying, hey, that doesn't belong there, that doesn't belong there. And as a creative, when you're a part of these things, you have to take that into account, and you have to do your best to stay true to the spirit of what you're working on. In this case, Disneyland, Disney World, what Walt built and did, that historic legacy. You're not going to get it right every single time, but it's the spirit of trying to. But Disney many times gets very antagonistic toward their fan base. We've seen this on the movie side when it comes to Lucasfilm and Star Wars. Whenever Last Jedi came out and people didn't like it, they attacked the fan base there. You know, we've seen a lot of people going at the fans for not liking certain things. Seems like the same thing here, kind of nitpicking at the fans for noticing things. They noticed something that I think, and she can say what she wants in here, but they got caught using it. Instead of just saying, hey, you know what, we're sorry. We shouldn't have done that. We're not going to use AI art anymore, and we're going to, you know, we won't do whatever it is. However you want to spin that. But they will never take an L. They'll never admit wrong. They'll just play it off in some way and then try and move along. And really my beefs with how Disney runs things many times is not historical Disney. Obviously, Walt Disney and the way that the Disney name and brand was, it is the current leadership of Disney. And they're just stuck in this pattern of thinking that, again, having to change existing things in the parks that are successful because there's a certain amount of people that apparently are upset by it. I don't think this is a great way to go about things. You're never going to make everybody happy, but you start changing. Again, this just opens up a whole box of things. If you can't have a haunted bride in here that is a axe murderer, which is part of a storyline, if her presence in the ride is celebrating it, what else cannot be in the parks? I think you just open up all these things about what could change. And again, I don't necessarily think they're going to change all this stuff. I just think they say these things because they want the points, the accolades for doing something that they think a certain group of people are going to give them credit for doing. Because if they were really serious about this, again, lots of things the villains wouldn't exist in the parks. You're not going to build a villain's land. Like, again, this doesn't make any logical sense of telling a story. Like, there's going to be bad guys in a story, and some people are going to like the bad guys. Kind of how it goes here. This is a corporate mindset set from the top from Bob Iger. And I've always said that any of the ills with Disney, many times people will write about these things. Outlets will write about Disney's mess ups here and their mistakes here, but they never put blame on Bob Iger. Bob Iger has been there, if not more, close to 20 years. So if there's wrongs with Disney, no matter what department, it's on Bob Iger's leadership. And I think under Bob Iger's leadership, creativity is not where it should be. At least you look at Disney historically. This is a business culture issue of what is mandated from the top as priorities. And I think Imagineering has had a lot of talent leave the company. I mean, you look at Joe Rohde, you look at a lot of these Imagineers that have been in the company for a very long time were let go around the COVID time to save money. I think there's been a lot more corporate oversight from the C-suite onto what Imagineering can do. But on top of that, just hearing these quotes here about the reasons for these changes, defending the use of AI art and all these other things like that, I just baffled at the quotes here. It makes me have lots of questions about what they're able to do or what they will do into the future and the quality of those attractions and those lands. I think that's a very valid question to ask. And I want these things to be good. I want Disney to get back to doing the things they used to do, which was about the guest experience. Ultimately, that is your goal in a theme park of how your guests are going to experience these things. How are they going to feel? Do they resonate with this? And do they want to come back? That doesn't seem to be anywhere near the thinking or the thought process with any of these things. And I think ultimately that is the thing that has to change and get back to the very basics of providing a guest experience, telling a great story, and then everything else after that can follow. The money will follow, attendance can follow. Get back to creating experiences like they used to with that thinking in mind and saying, hey, let's do this just because we think we can do it. CEOs that have gotten a lot out of their people is notoriously Steve Jobs. I don't think was a nice guy, but he was an effective CEO. They would come to him and say, we can't do this. And he would say, do it. You're going to do this. And he would push people. Walt Disney did the same thing. I think this is one of these things where sometimes you have to have somebody willing to be a bad guy to some people to get the most out of people and push things and say, listen, we're not going to focus on the money. We're going to focus on experiences, creating something that's unique and magical. So I do hope they get back to the roots. Do I think they will? I'm an optimist. I think eventually they may, but I think as of right now, there's been no evidence coming from Imagineering or current work of Imagineering that gives me a lot of faith that that's the case. But here's to hoping that they can get back to their roots and start giving guest experiences the forefront of the thinking and not thinking about everything else but that seemingly. But either way, that's going to be it though for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about the changes that they are making to Disneyland's Haunted Mansion? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.